Gravity, a movie directed by Alfonso Cuarón in the year 2013. Dr. Ryan Stone is a medical engineer on her first shuttle mission. Her commander is veteran astronaut Matt Kowalski, helming his last flight before retirement. Then, during a routine spacewalk by the pair, disaster strikes. The shuttle is destroyed, leaving Ryan and Matt stranded in deep space with no link to Earth and no hope of rescue. As fear turns to panic, they realize that the only way home may be to venture further into space. The science behind the scene where Ryan had to let go to save Matt is that Isaac Newton tells us that an object in motion will remain in motion unless acted upon by an outside force. Kowalski was unable to arrest his forward movement by grabbing a hold of the ISS, so he goes floating off into space. Other than gravity, which we can ignore for this close contact scene because it is acting upon everything in the same way, there are no forces acting on Kowalski. He is moving away because he was moving in that direction and nothing stopped him. Now, what effect does Kowalski have on the situation? There is no force acting on him, but he too has a kinetic energy equal to half his mass times his velocity squared. So if the rubber band is to slow Ryan to a stop, it also has to slow Kowalski. So now, it has to absorb her energy and his energy. Kowalski's interpretation of the situation is that the parachute cords can absorb that much energy. So he figures that if he lets go of her hand, the parachute cords, instead of absorbing Ryan's kinetic energy and his kinetic energy, will only have to absorb Ryan's kinetic energy. Following is the scene where Ryan could jet her out on a fire extinguisher. Using the fire extinguisher would certainly move Ryan, but not necessarily in the direction she intended. In order for the fire extinguisher trick to work, the extinguisher would have needed to sit right at her center of mass. Imagine that kind of like the center of a seesaw with equal weights on both seats. It's the point where, if a pivot were placed there, the object would stay balanced and in place. Spraying a fire extinguisher from this point would push a balanced, upright Ryan in whatever direction she wanted to go. Lastly is the scene where a satellite was destroyed and formed a catastrophic cloud of space debris. It wouldn't happen as fast as in the movie, and it wouldn't impact quite so many satellites, but a space debris event could definitely come with huge consequences. In fact, it's happened before. In January 2007, the Chinese unleashed more than 1,600 pieces of debris into the atmosphere when they destroyed one of their own satellites with a missile. The impact of that missile strike sent the debris into orbits much different from the original satellites, creating a cloud of debris enveloping the Earth and to threaten any spacecraft between those two altitudes. One technology used in the movie is the spacesuit. A spacesuit is a garment worn to keep a human alive in the harsh environment of outer space, vacuum, and temperature extremes. Next is jetpack. It is also called as manned maneuvering unit used on space shuttle missions to perform untethered spacewalks. And the International Space Station. It is a space station in low Earth orbit where Ryan went inside to try to communicate with Matt and also to undock the space shuttle. Ryan Stone, we learn, has already lost everything a human can lose short of life itself. But she rediscovers her will to live when she accepts that what is happening will happen, whether she is alive or not. Life is a conscious choice, made when there is seemingly nothing left to live for, simply because being alive, why not? Ryan Stone decides to live, accepts that her decision ultimately means nothing, and carries on anyway. This, to me, is the perfect representation of hope. Gravity is basically the cinematic representation of our insignificance and the universe's total hostility toward the human condition and how that shapes our identity. Moon, a movie directed by Duncan Jones in the year 2009. In the near future, Lunar Industries has made a fortune after an oil crisis by building Sarang Station, a facility on the far side of the moon to mine the alternative fuel helium-3 from lunar soil. The facility is highly automated, requiring only a single human to maintain operations, oversee the harvesters, and launch canisters bound for Earth containing the extracted helium-3. Sam Bell nears the end of his 3-year work contract at Sarang Station. Chronic communication problems have disabled his live feed from Earth and limit him to occasional recorded messages from his wife, Tess, who was pregnant with their daughter Eve when he left. His only companion is an artificial intelligence named Gertie, who assists with the base automation and provides comfort for him. The science behind this movie is the helium-3 mining in Moon. But first, what is helium-3? It is the substance that the film's lunar mining operation is harvesting, a light, non-radioactive isotope of helium. Helium-3 has been identified as an essential ingredient for nuclear fusion, a still unproven process that could potentially generate vast amounts of clean energy to supply the Earth's energy needs. One technology used in the movie is a robot computer named Gertie 3000 who takes care of Sam and makes sure that Sam is kept alive and functioning for his 3-year life on the moon. Gertie also keeps Sam informed of the state of the facility. The facility, which is a large mining base which operates almost entirely autonomously without needing Sam to do very much. It contains all the basic features needed to maintain and support its primary function, mining resources. Next is the Lunar Rover, a space exploration vehicle used by Sam.
First Man is directed by Damien Chazelle, starring Ryan Gosling as Neil Armstrong. The short background of the story is when Armstrong is elected to the command Apollo 11, and Slayton informs him that it will likely be the first lunar landing. As the mission nears, Neil becomes increasingly preoccupied and emotionally distant from his family. Just prior to the launch, Janet confronts Armstrong about the possibility that he won't survive the flight and insists that should explain the risk of the mission of their young sons. After telling them about the risky phases, Armstrong says goodbye to his family and departs. The highlight of the story is when Apollo 11 successfully launches and arrives at the moon 4 days later. Armstrong and Aldrin undock in the lunar module and begin the landing attempt. They realize that they are coming too fast and are going to overshoot their designated landing site. The new landing site turns out to have much rougher terrain, forcing Armstrong to take manual control of the spacecraft. He lands the lunar module successfully with minimal fuel remaining. After setting foot on the moon, Armstrong drops Karen's bracelet into Little West crater. The science behind the movie is gravity. When we take off and go outside of the Earth, there is no gravity. Then the Apollo 11 landed successfully on the moon. Even though they get a small problem, but they still manage it. Let's go back on the moon. Moon has a gravity, but not so much like on Earth. The technology used in the movie are the spaceship which is Apollo 11, the spacesuit and the other equipment to survive and go back on Earth. How is it relevant to the formation of the society? In the times of Neil Armstrong, the society are waiting if their takeoff will be successful. They're going to be the first man to step on the moon. Arrival, directed by Denis Villeneuve, starring Amy Adams as Dr. Louis Banks. Based on the title, it is the arrival of the aliens on Earth. They carried by a big spaceship that lands on the US and any other country like Russia. They get threatened because we might get colonized by the aliens. The US Army heard about Dr. Louis Banks, and they discovered that she can communicate with plants and animals, so they thought that she might understand what the aliens were saying or how they communicate. Before tension leads to war. The highlight of the story is when Dr. Louis Banks started to understand how the aliens communicate. It sounds like whale or dolphin noises, and it's a circular array of inky patterns, known as logograms, in order to communicate. Banks writes down English words and acts out what they mean. The science behind the movie is the gravity. They wore a spacesuit when they climbed up on the ship, and when they reached the half of it, they began to float because there's no gravity on that part. The technology used in the movie is the spaceship, the equipments that are used to climb up on the ship, and the suit that they wore for their oxygen supply. How is it relevant to the formation of the society? The countries who landed by the same spaceship were threatened, mostly Russia and North Korea. And when Dr. Banks started to understand what the aliens were saying, the society calms down, especially the said countries, before tension leads to war.
Passengers. It is a sci-fi movie that airs in 2016. It's directed by Martin Tildum, starring Jennifer Lawrence as Aurora Lane, Chris Pratt as Jim Preston, and Michael Sheen as Arthur. Jim Preston is one of the passengers of the sleeper ship called the Avalon, that transporting 5,000 passengers in hibernation pods to the planet Homestead 2. Due to an asteroid collision of the ship, Jim Preston wakes up 90 years too early and met Arthur the android barman and suffered on an isolation for a year. Due to loneliness, Jim Preston has awakened Aurora and claimed that her pet had malfunctioned. Later, they find out that the ship is in great danger and only the two can save the lives of the people of the ship. Robot is one of the technology that's shown in the movie. And also that. And whoa, that suit. Also the spaceship. And also the hibernation pods that put passengers into a state of stasis for trips through space. And of course, the zero gravity in the space. Mission to Mars is a sci-fi movie in the year 2000, directed by Brian De Palma, starring Gary Sinise, Don Cheadle, Connick Nielsen, Jerry O'Connell, Kim Delaney, and Tim Robbins. In the year 2020, the first manned Mars exploration mission goes awry when it meets a catastrophic and mysterious disasters after reporting an unidentified structure. The storm kills all of them, but one crew survive. The highlight of the story is when the rescue mission is launched. They found the survivor of the first mission and informed them that it was no ordinary storm. And they found out about the structure. And now they're in the space. Look at those planets. Different planets. And the technologies that they use. The Mars 2020 mission leverages the successful architecture of NASA's Mars Science Laboratory mission by duplicating most of its entry, descent and landing system and much of its rover design. Wow! You see the structure? That's science! Biological science! And that is The Martian!